Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come with warning signs. It arrives dressed in celebration, cloaked in smiles, and takes the shape of the person you trusted most. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, a tribute to a decade of triumph. For 10 years, Alina Porter had stood beside her husband, Ryan Collins, helping him transform his idea into a gleaming glass and steel empire. As she prepared to attend the anniversary gala at his uptown headquarters, she believed they were celebrating a shared success. But Ryan was celebrating something entirely different. Right in front of his most influential clients and colleagues, he stood with a younger woman, draped on his arm, and with a confident smile, introduced her, not as an employee, but as his future wife. He had orchestrated every detail of his new beginning, but forgot one essential detail: the name on the deed to the very building they were standing in. The penthouse above the city buzzed faintly with the sterile hum of climate control. It was an expensive silence. Alina Porter stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her reflection, faint, ghostly, merged with the glowing expanse of city lights. To anyone outside looking in, she had it all. The Porter name carried legacy weight in this city: old money, real estate dynasties. The penthouse, a wedding gift from her late father, Richard Porter, was only one jewel in a crown of generational wealth. Her husband, Ryan Collins, was supposed to be the other. He was her choice, her rebellion. He hadn't come from wealth. He came from hunger, from drive. He had that spark in his eyes that, to someone raised in the cold, polished halls of privilege, felt electric. She saw in him a partner, not just someone to inherit her legacy, but someone to build something new with, something theirs. And so they built Collins Vanguard Group, a boutique investment firm. Her father's initial seed money, Ryan insisted on formalizing and paying back with interest, was the soil. Ryan's tireless ambition was the sun and rain. Alina's quiet strategy and elite network were the trellises that helped it grow. Now, 10 years later, the company was a powerhouse. And Ryan was the king of his domain. A soft buzz on the marble kitchen island snapped her out of her reverie. His phone. Ryan had been in the shower for 20 minutes, his daily ritual, which lately had stretched longer, more frequent. The screen lit up with a message. "Sabrina can't wait for tonight. The world's about to see what I've known all along." So, Elena's breath caught in her throat. Sabrina Chang, the new senior investment strategist, hired 6 months ago. She was sharp, stunning, and driven by a hunger that reminded Alina of a much younger Ryan. He'd praised her endlessly, calling her a game-changer for the firm. Alina had met her a few times at corporate events. She remembered Sabrina's handshake, firm, almost confrontational, and the way her gaze lingered on Ryan just a beat too long. Alina had brushed it off. Paranoia, she'd thought. Just the quiet whisper of insecurity that even the strongest marriages aren't immune to. Ryan was busy, stressed. The 10-year anniversary gala was a massive production, a signal to the financial elite. Of course he was distracted. Of course the late nights were business. His distance was just a byproduct of pressure. That's what she'd told herself over and over, polishing the excuses until they gleamed like truth. But this message, this wasn't business. This was something else. A promise. A secret shared. The bathroom door clicked open. Ryan stepped out, steam trailing behind him. He wore a charcoal robe, his dark hair slicked back, jaw sharp, posture effortless. He carried the kind of calm confidence that drew people in, clients, partners, women. "Hey," he said, voice smooth like aged bourbon. He walked over and kissed her cheek, a gesture so practiced it felt hollow. He didn't notice the stiffness in her shoulders or that her smile never reached her eyes. "You ready to knock 'em dead tonight?" "Elena," the governors confirmed, "Harrington from Summit Ventures is flying in just for this. This is it. We cement our legacy. Our legacy." The words landed like ash in her mouth. She wanted to hold up the phone, to shout, "Who is Sabrina? What is she about to see?" But that wasn't her way. Her father, Richard Porter, a man who could dismantle rivals with a single call, had taught her well. Never show your hand until you're ready to lay down the winning card. Emotion is weakness. Knowledge is power. "Of course, darling," she replied, her voice a flawless imitation of the devoted wife. "I just need to figure out what to wear. Something that says power behind the throne, don't you think?" Elena said. Ryan chuckled, already heading for his walk-in closet. "Whatever you wear, you'll be the most stunning woman in the room. You always are." The compliment, once a source of warmth, now settled in her gut like cold stone. He hadn't truly seen her in years. To him, she was the Porter name, the flawless hostess, the elegant accessory by his side. He had no idea of the storm gathering quietly behind her calm hazel eyes. As he disappeared behind the closet doors, Elena drew a steadying breath. The gala was in 3 hours. For 10 years, she had been the strategist behind the empire, handling the logistics, calming the conflicts, connecting Ryan to the power brokers, while letting him bask in the spotlight. She had believed they were equals. Now she saw it clearly. To him, the throne had only ever had room for one, and he was already grooming her replacement. A cold, quiet resolve took root in her chest, hardening over the ache. Ryan was a precise planner. Tonight, he would make a bold, calculated move, one designed to reshape their public image, their future. He thought he held every card. But he'd forgotten one. Elena walked to the large carved desk in the corner of the living room. It had once belonged to her father. She slipped a silver key from the chain around her neck and unlocked a small rosewood box. Inside were carefully kept personal records, ones her father had instructed her to maintain separately from the marital estate. Birth certificates, her private trust, and a thick blue folder. She pulled it free. On the cover, in her father's sharp, confident handwriting, Collins Vanguard Group, 92 Lexington Tower, property deed and trust agreement. Ryan had repaid the startup capital years ago and took great pride in it. But her father, always the strategist, had never treated it as a simple loan. When family was involved, the support came bundled, and part of that bundle was the physical workspace. The top 3 floors of the prestigious Lexington Tower, bought outright through a blind trust. Leased to the firm for $1 symbolic per year. The lease was airtight, the terms unbreakable, and the sole beneficiary of that trust, the true legal owner of the company's headquarters, Elena Porter. She ran her finger over the embossed gold seal. Ryan had overlooked one crucial detail in his ambitious rush to build an empire. He'd forgotten its foundation, the one Elena's father had laid. He saw the building as a monument to his success. He never realized it was actually his cage. Tonight, he intended to unveil his future wife to the world. Elena smiled slowly, a dangerous curve tugging at her lips. What a shame. He was about to do it in her building. She closed the folder with deliberate calm. The pain hadn't left. A raw, gaping wound still throbbed in her chest. But something new had joined it, the cold, exhilarating pulse of strategy. Richard Porter's daughter was ready to enter the arena. The next 2 hours were a display of absolute control. Elena moved through her preparations with surgical precision. She chose her dress, a sapphire blue sheath from a designer Ryan wouldn't recognize. It wasn't about looking beautiful tonight. It was about command. The color was deliberate, deep water, frozen steel. She pulled her blonde hair back into a sleek chignon at the nape of her neck, not the soft, loose curls Ryan used to prefer. Her jewelry was sparse but meaningful. Diamond earrings gifted by her father on her 21st birthday, and on her right hand, a striking sapphire ring that matched her dress perfectly. Her wedding ring, however, remained behind, resting silently in its velvet tray. While she dressed, she made 2 phone calls. The first was to Charles Wentworth, her father's oldest friend, and the Porter family's estate attorney for over 4 decades. He was mostly retired now, but his mind was still razor-sharp. "Charles, it's Elena." "Elena, my dear girl, to what do I owe this surprise? I hope you're calling to remind an old man about tonight's celebration. My tux is already laid out." "I need a favor," she said, her voice calm, "and your full discretion." Instantly, the warmth in his tone vanished, replaced by the clipped focus of a professional. "Of course. What do you need?" "I want you to bring a certified copy of the Lexington Tower Trust Agreement. I have the original, but I want a notarized duplicate on site. And I need you ready to act as a legal witness for a conversation." There was a brief pause. Charles was one of the few people who knew the full depth of Richard Porter's legacy. He understood exactly what that document meant. He didn't ask questions. He simply replied, "I'll be there. Anything else?" "Yes," Elena said, glancing at her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was ready. "Be prepared," she added softly, "for a bit of theater." The second call was to a man named Daniel Cho, the head of IT security at Collins Vanguard Group. Daniel had been with the company since day one. He was a quiet, unassuming presence, resolutely loyal to Elena. Years ago, when his son had become critically ill, it was Elena who had quietly arranged for a world-class specialist, covering the costs herself and bypassing the company's insurance system. Daniel had never forgotten that debt. "Daniel, it's Elena Collins." She never used her maiden name at work, but tonight the illusion had to remain intact. "Mrs. Collins, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," Elena replied, her tone calm. "I just have a small, unusual request for tonight's gala. During the main presentation, when Ryan is giving his speech, I need you to do something for me. There will be a large display behind the podium, correct?" "Yes, the logo animation loop. I'm going to send you a file. At a very specific moment, I need you to override the loop and display this instead." Daniel paused. "And what will the signal be?" "You'll see me take a sip of water at the front table. That's your cue." He hesitated. "Mrs. Collins, Mr. Collins has a very particular deck he plans to use. This would interrupt it." "I understand," Elena said, her voice firm but never unkind. "This isn't about business, it's personal, and I wouldn't ask unless it was critically important. Can I rely on your discretion?" Daniel was silent for only a beat. "For you, Mrs. Collins, anything. Send the file." Elena prepared it herself, a simple, tasteful slide. White background, black text. No threats, no drama. Just truth. A direct quote from the trust. "The property located at 92 Lexington Tower, floors 48, 49, and 50, is held in the irrevocable Porter Family Trust, with Elena Porter as the sole and exclusive beneficiary and legal owner. All leasing agreements are subject to her sole discretion." She emailed the file to Daniel with the subject line, "For presentation use." When Ryan stepped out of the closet, he looked every bit the monarch he aspired to be. His tuxedo was flawless, cufflinks platinum, smile radiant. "Wow," he said, taking her in. "You look formidable." It was perhaps the most sincere compliment he had given her in years. "Thank you, Ryan," she said smoothly. "It's a formidable occasion." The elevator ride down was silent. The air shimmered with tension. Ryan was nearly buzzing, brimming with anticipation, charged with the thrill of the reveal he was about to unleash. In his mind, he was the ringmaster, orchestrating the grand finale. Elena, seated beside him, was the embodiment of poise. The blue folder containing the original deed was tucked neatly inside her designer clutch. A strange sense of calm had settled over her. The initial pain had burned away, leaving only cold, focused clarity. She wasn't just here to witness her husband's betrayal. She was here to direct it. They arrived at Lexington Tower, the grand lobby already pulsing with the city's elite. Investors, politicians, socialites, the powerful and the powerful adjacent. Ryan was instantly surrounded, shaking hands, nodding, soaking in praise. Elena remained beside him, the perfect image of the elegant, supportive wife. She smiled, nodded, exchanged pleasantries. And then she saw Sabrina Chang. The younger woman wore crimson. Bold, deliberate, a statement. She looked radiant, flushed with the thrill of victory. Their eyes met briefly, and for just a flicker, Elena saw something in Sabrina's expression. A mix of triumph and pity. It cut deeper than she expected. But she buried the sting. Pity was the last thing she would ever accept from that woman. Near the champagne fountain, she spotted Charles Wentworth, small in stature, refined in presence, dressed in an impeccably tailored navy suit. As she approached, he gave her a discreet nod, lightly tapping his breast pocket. "The document is in place," he murmured, handing her a glass of champagne. "Thank you, Charles," she replied quietly. "Now enjoy the show." Elena floated through the crowd like a queen in full regalia. The Porter name still turned heads, still demanded respect. Men who had once dealt with her father approached her with reverence. "Elena, you look radiant. Your father would be proud of what Ryan's built," one said with a warm smile. "My father believed in strong foundations," she replied smoothly, her words layered with a meaning only she understood. She took her seat at the head table, front and center. Ryan's place was beside hers, though he was still working the crowd. The seat on his opposite side sat noticeably empty, a position of honor, waiting to be filled. The lights dimmed. The company's COO, a man named Robert Lang, took the stage. He launched into a polished introduction, praising a decade of innovation and bold leadership. He was building to a climax, and just behind the curtain, near the edge of the stage, Elena spotted Sabrina, half concealed, nearly trembling with excitement. She looked like a bride waiting to be called forward. Robert finished. And now, the man who made it all possible. Our founder, our leader, our visionary, Ryan Collins. The room exploded with applause. Ryan strode confidently onto the stage, basking in the glow. Ryan looked out over the crowd, his eyes gleaming. This was his apex, the summit of everything he had worked for. He began his speech, his voice rich and steady, commanding the room with practiced ease. He spoke of humble beginnings, of daring ambition, of the relentless pursuit of greatness. He was magnetic, part showman, part visionary, and the room was captivated. Elena sat perfectly still, hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression unreadable as she watched the performance unfold. This last decade, Ryan said, his voice lowering into something more intimate, has been about building a foundation, about sacrifice, about making hard choices to arrive at this moment. He paused, his eyes drifting across the crowd, conspicuously skipping over Elena. But success isn't a destination, it's a journey, and that journey means nothing without someone to share it with. The future demands a new vision, a new kind of partnership. Here it came, the tension in the room thickened. He was veering off script. The crowd shifted, murmuring with curiosity. I've brought this company to where it stands today, Ryan continued, his voice now full of swelling emotion. But for the next chapter, for the future of Collins Vanguard, I need a partner who shares my drive, my fire, my belief in what's to come. He turned and extended his hand toward the edge of the stage. And so it is my great honor to introduce to you, not just an incredible mind within this firm, but the woman who will walk beside me into the future. My inspiration, my partner, my future wife, Sabrina Cheng. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Sabrina, radiant in her crimson gown, stepped forward and took Ryan's outstretched hand. The applause was hesitant, scattered, confused. Eyes darted between the smiling couple on stage and the woman sitting at the center of the head table, stone-faced, unmoving. Elena, his real wife. Ryan beamed, raising Sabrina's hand like a victor holding a prize. He was so immersed in his moment of glory, so wrapped in his carefully crafted story, that he missed what was happening in the room, how admiration shifted into unease and whispers rippled like a rising tide. He saw only the bright, perfect future he imagined, shining beside him in red. Sabrina, for her part, looked elated, if slightly overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Sabrina gazed at Ryan with unfiltered adoration, seemingly oblivious to the hundreds of eyes now locked on the woman she was displacing. In her mind, the story Ryan had fed her for months was finally coming true. He was the brave man breaking free from a cold, loveless marriage of obligation, for real, passionate love. She was the heroine now. Ryan leaned toward the microphone, his voice thick with rehearsed sincerity. Sabrina and I will lead Collins Vanguard into a bold new era. This building, this very office, will be the home of our new beginning. That was the cue. At the front table, Elena lifted her glass of water. She took a slow, deliberate sip, her eyes locked on Daniel Cho, stationed at the tech booth near the back. He saw it. His face was pale, but he nodded, barely visible. A subtle confirmation. Behind Ryan and Sabrina, the towering screen flickered. The gleaming Collins Vanguard logo blinked away. For a moment, there was only black. Then, white. Crisp, clean, brutal. The slide Elena had crafted filled the screen. Black text, sharp as a blade. The property, located at 92 Lexington Tower, floors 48, 49, and 50, is held in the irrevocable Porter Family Trust, with Elena Porter as the sole and exclusive beneficiary and legal owner. All leasing agreements are subject to her sole discretion. Ryan was still smiling, his arm wrapped around Sabrina, when the first gasp echoed from the audience. Another followed. Fingers pointed. Confused murmurs swelled into a loud collective unrest. Ryan's grin faltered. He turned toward the screen, brows drawn, clearly expecting a tech hiccup. He read the slide. Once, twice. The color drained from his face. The light, his stage, his moment, seemed to suck the life from his skin. His arm dropped from Sabrina's waist. Sabrina looked up, puzzled, then followed his stunned gaze to the screen. Her triumphant expression curdled into confusion. Ryan, what is that? What does that mean? But Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. His carefully constructed reality was unraveling, publicly, unmistakably, and without mercy. He stared into the crowd, mouth slightly open, blinking like a man struck by lightning. And then, a new sound emerged. Soft, steady, the unmistakable click of high heels on polished marble. Elena had risen, with a calm so sharp it was nearly terrifying. She moved toward the stage, her clutch containing the original deed firm in hand. The crowd parted instinctively, as if she were Moses dividing the sea. Every eye locked onto her. She was no longer the humiliated wife. She was the executioner. Elena ascended the short staircase, stopping just feet away from the stunned couple. She didn't acknowledge Sabrina. Her gaze never left Ryan. "A beautiful speech, Ryan," she said, her voice calm, measured, amplified clearly by the still live microphone. The room froze, collectively holding its breath. A new dawn, a bold future, very inspiring. She stepped closer. "There's just one small piece of paperwork we need to settle before you and—" She let the name linger, sharp and foreign on her tongue. "Sabrina, begin this next chapter." She reached into her clutch and withdrew the blue folder. She didn't open it. She simply held it up, steady and certain. "You seem to be under a slight misapprehension about whose headquarters this is." Ryan stared at the folder, then at Elena. The shock on his face had twisted into something darker. Panic, desperation, fury. "Elena, don't do this," he hissed, barely audible, venom threaded through his voice. "Not here." "Here's exactly where you chose," she replied, her voice never rising, never betraying the inferno beneath her flawless exterior. "You selected this stage. You invited the governor. Our clients, our friends. You wanted a public performance." She paused. "Well, here it is. But the difference is, mine is rooted in truth, not fantasy." Finally, she turned her gaze to Sabrina, whose glow had long since vanished. Horror and confusion had taken its place. "Miss Chang," Elena said, tone professional and impersonal, "you were introduced as the future of this company. As a talented analyst, I'm sure you understand the importance of due diligence before committing to a partnership." Her eyes returned to Ryan. "You see, the asset you believe you've acquired," she gestured toward him, a slight flick of her wrist, "comes with certain liabilities." Then, sweeping her hand out to encompass the grand, opulent space around them, she added, "And the foundation upon which you plan to build that future, this building, is in fact mine." She turned her eyes back on Ryan, sharp, unflinching. "My father taught me that the first rule of business is to know your assets. And you, of all people, should remember the second." She paused. "Let the silence settle like dust. Never tolerate a liability that threatens the enterprise." Elena placed the folder gently on the podium. "This is the original deed," she said. "As sole owner, I am now exercising my discretionary rights under the trust agreement. Effective immediately, the current lease held by Collins Vanguard Group is terminated." A new wave of disbelief rippled through the room. From the crowd, Charles Wentworth stepped forward. His voice, though calm, rang out with the weight of finality. "I can attest to the authenticity of this document and to Mrs. Porter's full legal authority as the rightful property owner." Elena turned to Ryan, whose face was a tangle of disbelief and barely contained rage. "So by all means, Ryan," she said coolly, "please, continue your speech, share your bright new vision. You'll just need to do it somewhere else." Her voice sharpened. "I want you, your personal belongings, and your future wife." She laced the words with acid. "Off my property by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Security will ensure it." She turned her head slightly toward the side of the stage. The head of security stood there, eyes wide, frozen in place. He looked at her, then Ryan, then back at her, and nodded. He began moving toward the stage. Sabrina, finally finding her voice, let out a shaky, broken cry. "Ryan, you told me she knew. You told me it was over. You said this was all yours." Ryan couldn't look at her. He could only stare at Elena. His eyes were burning, not with defiance, but with the full fury of absolute public defeat. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and stripped of everything in the most public way imaginable. The king had been dethroned in the throne room that was never his to begin with. Elena didn't wait for the security team to arrive. Her work was complete. She cast one last glance over the devastation left behind. Her husband's broken pride, Sabrina's tear-streaked confusion, and then she turned, her back straight, head high. She walked off the stage, through the stunned, silent crowd, and out of the ballroom, never once looking back. The click of her heels against the marble floor echoed behind her like a closing gavel. Final, deliberate, triumphant. The moment Elena Porter vanished through the grand ballroom doors, the spell broke. Chaos erupted. The exit of the Queen signaled the unraveling of the court. The governor, his face locked in a mask of diplomatic indifference, was the first to be quietly ushered out by his security detail. One by one, the city's elite followed. Investors, executives, politicians, fleeing the nuclear fallout of scandal. Reputation was currency, and no one wanted to get caught in the collapse. On stage, Ryan Collins remained motionless, a monument to shattered power. The guards reached him. Two large, expressionless men in dark, tailored suits stepped forward. One of them, George, a longtime building employee, spoke in a voice that was quiet, respectful, but unmistakably firm. "Mr. Collins, I think it's time to go." "Mr. Collins." "Not, sir." A subtle, devastating shift. The power in the room had officially changed hands. Sabrina snapped. She turned to Ryan, her voice rising into a shrill cry of disbelief. "You lied to me. You lied about everything. The lease, the property? What the hell is happening? You said she was nothing, just a society wife. You said the divorce was done." Ryan finally jolted from his stunned paralysis, grabbing her arm. "Shut up, Sabrina. Just shut up," he hissed. The charm was gone. The facade had crumbled. He wasn't a visionary CEO anymore. He was a man cornered, stripped bare. His eyes darted from Sabrina's face to the backs of guests fleeing the ballroom, to the glowing white slide that still glared behind him like a verdict. His empire, decapitated in one precise public strike. "Don't touch me," Sabrina screamed, yanking her arm away. Whatever fantasy she had believed in, the romance, the promise, had shattered. Now all that remained was the truth. She hadn't been his muse. She had been his co-conspirator in a failed coup. And she was about to walk away, unemployed and publicly humiliated. "You've ruined me," she spat. Ryan didn't even register her words. His mind was spinning, desperate for escape. He suddenly turned to the remaining staff and guests. "This is illegal," he shouted, voice cracking. "She can't do this. This building. This is company property. We have a lease." From the crowd, Charles Wentworth's voice cut cleanly through the noise, calm and ironclad. "The lease your firm holds, Mr. Collins, is with the Porter Family Trust, not with Mrs. Porter directly. And as stated in Clause 17B, clearly outlined in the original agreement, the trustee reserves the right to terminate said lease without cause in cases involving disrepute to the property or the trust." He paused, his gaze cold and unwavering. "I'd say this qualifies." Ryan went pale. He remembered the documents. He'd signed them a decade ago, barely skimming the legalese, so eager to access the Porter capital, so hungry for the name, the building, the prestige. He'd seen only the cash. He'd missed the cage. He didn't resist as the guards flanked him and began to lead him from the stage. As he passed the podium, his eyes fell on the blue folder Elena had left. In a final act of defiance, he swiped at it. Papers scattered across the marble floor. The original deed slid out, undeniable, final. Across the polished marble floor, the papers scattered like fallen confetti. Ryan's final, childish gesture of defiance, sealing his disgrace in the eyes of the few who still remained. Sabrina stood alone on the stage. The crimson of her gown, once daring and bold, now looked garish and cheap beneath the unforgiving lights. The crowd was gone. The dream was over. She hugged her arms around herself and began to cry. Not for love, but for the future she'd once believed was hers. Elena didn't go home. Instead, she returned to the one place that had always been her refuge, her father's library in the old Porter estate, left untouched since the day he passed. She entered the cool, dark room, the scent of old leather, ink, and aged paper wrapping around her like a memory. She didn't turn on the lights. She simply sat in his worn leather armchair, the one facing the cold, unlit hearth, and let the silence surround her. The adrenaline had drained away. And in its place was the vast, hollow ache of betrayal. She had stood in front of hundreds of people and executed the most calculated act of her life. But now, alone in this quiet sanctuary, the strength she wore like armor began to crack. Her fingers trembled against the leather, her throat clenched against a scream that never came. She had won. But the victory felt muted. She had sacrificed a decade for a dream, for a partnership she thought was real. She had believed in Ryan, had celebrated his achievements as if they were their own. To realize that he had seen her not as a partner, but as a stepping stone, was a pain deeper than she'd ever imagined. It wasn't just the man she mourned, it was the illusion. The belief that love, once forged in fire, could survive success, temptation, and time. The tears she had refused to let fall in public now quietly welled. She wasn't just grieving the marriage. She was mourning the woman she used to be, the one who believed that love could be a union of equals, not a calculated acquisition. Her phone buzzed. A message from Charles. "It's done. He's gone. The staff is awaiting instructions. What's our next move?" Elena wiped her eyes. The grief would need to be faced eventually, but not tonight. Tonight was about what came next. The queen had taken back her castle. Now she had to rule it. She stood and switched on a single green-shaded lamp atop her father's desk. The soft glow warmed the room, pushing back the darkness. Her eyes lifted to the portraits lining the walls. Generations of porters staring back at her, stoic and unyielding. They had built this legacy. She would protect it. She was one of them. Elena picked up her phone and began to type. "Charles, instruct Daniel Cho to lock Ryan and Sabrina out of the system. Full access revoked. Emails, servers, files, like everything. Have security collect their personal belongings. Send them to a secure storage unit. Tell Robert Lang to schedule an all-hands emergency meeting for 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be leading it. And Charles, find me the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city." The war is just beginning. She hit send. A new kind of stillness settled over her. Not numbness, but clarity. Steel. Ryan had underestimated her. He had mistaken her quiet support for fragility. Her love for foolishness. Now he was about to learn what a porter does when cornered. He wanted a new beginning. She'd give him one, from the rubble. The next morning, the atmosphere inside Colin's Vanguard group was heavy. Anxious whispers, darting eyes, a silent panic. The news of the previous night had torn through the city like wildfire. Everyone knew Ryan Collins, the golden boy, had been dethroned. And the quiet, elegant wife no one took seriously was now not just the landlord, but the ruler. At exactly 10 a.m., Elena Porter walked into the main conference room. She wore a sharply tailored charcoal gray pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were calm and unwavering. She didn't sit at the head of the table. She stood, and the room fell silent. "Good morning," she began, her voice smooth but firm. "I know you all have questions, so let me be perfectly clear. The ownership of this building is not in dispute, but the future operations of this firm are. My goal is singular: stability. I will protect our clients' interests, which have been recklessly endangered by Mr. Collins's actions." The room remained frozen. Robert Lang, the COO, longtime loyalist to Ryan, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Porter, with all due respect, Ryan built this company. His relationships, they're the foundation of our client base." Elena met his gaze, unwavering. "The relationships Ryan built are now liabilities." What happened was not a personal misstep. It was a catastrophic failure of judgment, and it exposed this firm to scandal, legal vulnerability, and reputational damage. She let the silence linger, let the weight of the truth settle. "The foundation you speak of?" She paused, her voice low but deadly. "It's cracked. Therefore," Elena said, her voice unwavering, "as of this morning, I have filed for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and more importantly, I've petitioned the court to freeze Ryan's assets pending a full forensic audit of the firm's financials." A wave of shock spread across the conference room. This wasn't about marriage anymore. This was war. "A forensic audit?" Robert blurted out. That's not necessary. The books are clean." "Are they?" Elena asked, her tone glacial. "Let's hope so, because my father didn't just teach me real estate, Robert." She leveled her gaze at him. "He taught me how to read a balance sheet. And for the past 6 months, I've seen things, vaguely labeled consulting fees, discretionary expenses, significantly beyond the norm, even for a firm this size." This wasn't just fallout from betrayal. This had been building for months. Elena hadn't waited for a text message to tell her something was wrong. The late nights, the distance, the shift in Ryan's behavior. She had already started digging, quietly hiring an independent accountant to review public filings. And what she found had alarmed her. Now, with full authority, she could investigate from the inside. Over the next week, Colin's Vanguard became a war zone. Through his attorneys, Ryan fought back, hard. He accused Elena of staging a personal vendetta, a hostile corporate coup. He tried rallying support from senior partners and clients, casting himself as the victim of an unstable, emotional wife. But the story didn't stick. Everyone remembered the gala. They remembered the screen. the slide. The moment the illusion shattered, his support evaporated. Sabrina Chang vanished, her profile scrubbed from the firm's website. Rumor had it she had retained counsel and was threatening to sue Ryan for misrepresentation and wrongful termination. She had been a piece on the board, not a queen. And now, she was left with nothing but whispers and shame. But the real reckoning came from the numbers. The forensic accounting team Elena had hired moved in fast and without mercy. They combed through the company's finances like bloodhounds, and what they found confirmed her suspicions. It wasn't just excessive spending, it was fraud. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Daniel Cho, the firm's loyal head of IT. Elena called him into her new office, Ryan's former office, now fully redecorated and repurposed. "Daniel," she said, "I need everything." Ryan was building a life, an expensive one, far beyond what his reported income could support. Were there signs, hidden servers, private communications? Daniel hesitated. He was loyal to her, but what she was asking crossed a boundary. "Mrs. Porter, what you're looking for," Daniel said carefully, "would be on Ryan's private server. It's firewalled off from the company network." Elena nodded. "Then get in." Her voice was calm, final. "This isn't about my marriage anymore," she said. "This is about crimes, potentially federal crimes, that could bring down this firm and everyone tied to it. If he stole from this company, then he didn't just steal from me. He stole from all of us." That was all Daniel needed. The next morning, he returned with a single USB drive. He was arrogant, Daniel said, handing it to her. "Used a shell corporation, Future Dawn Enterprises, registered in the Cayman Islands. He's been funneling money into it for the past 18 months. He masked the transfers as consulting fees, but they weren't going to a real firm. He's been building a nest egg, a massive one." The data was irrefutable, the smoking gun. Ryan hadn't just planned to replace Elena. He had been siphoning money out of the company, their company, to bankroll a new life. Those consulting payments weren't just dinners or designer gifts for Sabrina. He had been bleeding the firm from the inside out. The total? Nearly $8 million. That night, Elena sat at her father's old desk, the evidence spread out before her. And the betrayal, it was worse than she had ever imagined. This wasn't a moment of passion. It was a long con, a cold, calculated heist. He hadn't just stopped loving her. He had plotted to dismantle her legacy, and he'd nearly succeeded. She thought of the options in front of her. She could take the data, leverage it in divorce court, negotiate, force Ryan to walk away with nothing, keep it private, quiet, clean. But then she thought about the employees, the ones whose pensions depended on this firm's survival, the clients who had trusted them. The 10 years she had invested. A quiet settlement felt like complicity. It felt like letting him win. Her father had been tough, ruthless even, but never a thief. And that was the line Ryan had crossed. She picked up the phone and called the district attorney's office. The end for Ryan Collins didn't come with a courtroom showdown or dramatic final words, but it was coming. It happened on a gray Tuesday morning, on a nondescript sidewalk, beneath a sky as dull as the life he now led. Ryan Collins had just left his attorney's new office, a cramped, lifeless suite in a second-rate building, the kind of place that screamed decline. Even now, he held on to a sliver of his trademark arrogance. He still fancied himself a fighter, a victim of betrayal, a man wronged by a vindictive wife. He was talking strategy, planning a counterattack, a lawsuit, a media play. He still believed his charm, his voice, his presence could salvage something, rebuild the narrative. He imagined redemption, a comeback, a second act. He was, as always, the hero of his own story. As he stepped through the building's glass doors, adjusting the collar of a suit that now fit his thinner frame like a costume, two men in plain jackets stepped into his path. They looked like accountants or auditors, not threats. "Ryan Collins?" one of them asked, his tone flat. "Yes," Ryan replied, irritation flickering. "Another subpoena? You're under arrest." The badge was raised. The words followed like hammer blows. Grand larceny, multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement. They didn't register at first, but then came the handcuffs. Cold, unforgiving. Reality struck with brutal finality. "This is a mistake," Ryan stammered, the polish draining from his voice. "This is a marital dispute. My wife." "Your wife's testimony to the grand jury was clear, Mr. Collins," said the second agent, with the weary tone of someone long past sympathy. "So were the forensic reports, the Cayman account, the The transfers from foot. You have the right to remain silent. Click. The handcuffs locked around his wrists with a metallic finality that echoed through the hollow space where his future used to be. And just like that, the fight was gone. No more narrative. No more charm. No more Ryan the visionary, Ryan the hero, only Ryan the criminal. The legal battle that followed was pure formality. The district attorney's office had mountains of evidence, bank statements, shell company documents, testimony from Charles Wentworth, from Daniel Cho, from the entire accounting team. Elena had quietly assembled. But the most damning piece? Elena Porter's testimony. Cool, precise, unshakable. It was the capstone. She took the stand not as a scorned wife, but as a CEO betrayed. Elena Porter, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, exuded composure. She didn't speak of heartbreak. She spoke of wire transfers, shell corporations, and forged consulting invoices, with such surgical clarity that the courtroom was left breathless. It was facts, not fury, and it was devastating. No dramatics, no tears, just truth. Faced with an airtight case and the threat of more than a decade behind bars, Ryan Collins unraveled. Gone was the charm, the arrogance. All that remained was fear. He accepted a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation and forfeiture of all assets. He received 7 years in a minimum security federal facility. Everything was liquidated. The penthouse, the sports cars, the artwork, the platinum cufflinks. All of it sold. The funds funneled back into the company he'd tried to bleed dry. Sabrina Chang, the future wife, faced her own quiet downfall. Her threats of legal action fizzled. Ryan had nothing left. She became a pariah, her once bright career reduced to whispers and warnings at cocktail hours. She disappeared, another casualty of ego. In the aftermath, Elena rebuilt. She renamed the company, the Sterling Collins Group. The name was a stroke of brilliance. Sterling stood for legacy, stability, her father's foundation. Collins stayed as a public marker, a quiet psychological twist. She hadn't burned the house down. She'd preserved it, purified it. Elena led differently. Strategic, ethical, no theatrics. Fear was replaced with focus. Ego with collaboration. Clients who had hesitated returned, not swayed by marketing, but by her plan. Transparent, unflinching, disciplined. The company didn't just survive, it stabilized, and it began to thrive again. One crisp fall afternoon, Charles Wentworth stepped into her office. Sunlight poured through the glass, bathing the executive suite that was now unquestionably hers. He laid a single-bound document on her desk. "It's done," he said softly. "The divorce is final." He signed everything without protest. "You're officially a free woman, Elena," Charles said. She looked down at the final decree, the legal severance of a debt. But there was no rush of victory, no. Only a profound, quiet peace that settled in her chest like string. She crossed the office. Below her stretched the city, buzzing, sprawling, ceaseless. But it no longer looked like a place she sympathized for. It looked like a landscape. The paper in her hand was more than a legal document. It was a tombstone for 10 years of belief, hope, and devotion. It held no weight in her fingers, but it pressed down with the gravity of everything she had endured. She didn't cry. She had no tears left. What filled her now was silence, the kind that follows after a storm, where nothing moves and everything's dead. She had built a life on shared dreams, and when those dreams turned to lies, she had watched them crumble. Now there was only clarity, only space to rebuild, not from someone else's blueprint, but from her own. The scar Ryan left remained, a faint line in her memory. But it no longer hurt. It was just a reminder of what she'd survived, of what she'd claimed, of who she had become. She had burned her old life to the ground, and in the ashes forged something entirely her own. The Sterling Collins Group wasn't her father's legacy, and it certainly wasn't Ryan's dream. It was hers, built on truth, fortified by betrayal, and untouchable by anyone ever again. In the end, this wasn't a story about infidelity. It was a story about power. The power we give away, and the power we forget we already have. Elena Porter had once believed she was the scaffolding holding up someone else's ambitions, only to discover she owned the foundation. Her journey through the fire had revealed her greatest truth, that sometimes the most devastating endings are just the beginning of your real story. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're still with us, maybe that means something in this story touched your heart, even just a little. And if it did, let's take a quiet moment now, not to rewind the drama, but to really reflect. This wasn't just a tale of betrayal or scandal. It was about something deeper: resilience, reclaiming your worth, and remembering the power you already hold. We often let people borrow parts of us, our time, our love, our dreams, thinking it's the cost of connection. But when those people forget our value, it's not the end. It's the beginning of finding it again. Alina Porter thought she was a support beam, holding up someone else's empire. But in the fire of betrayal, she saw the truth. She'd owned the entire foundation. And from that rubble, she didn't just survive. She rebuilt something stronger, purer, unshakably hers. There's a quote I want to leave with you tonight from Nayyirah Waheed. "You will be lost and unlost over and over again. Relax, love, you were meant to be this glorious, epic story." If you're going through something hard, if you feel like you've lost your power, remember Alina. Her pain didn't define her. Her choices did. So if you're still here, really here, I want to thank you. This wasn't just a story. It was a mirror, maybe, for something you're walking through too. Like this video, if it moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that endings can be the start of something extraordinary. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story we tell might just be yours.